arrival was almost unspeakable.
We are all evil in some form or another.
I'm not guilty.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.
If I couldn't keep them there with me whole, at least I felt that I could keep their skeletons.
Hello and welcome to the Bad Taste Crime Podcast. I'm Vicky.
I'm Eileen, better known as Mom.
Welcome back to the show. We are in a new month, which means a brand new guest host. And this month we have my dearest mother.
And number one fan.
And so she says. She has listened to all of the episodes.
I have.
So
and may I remind
you
you that way in the beginning, you and Tiff made a comment about we should have our moms on sometime.
That's true. That was like years ago.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing
I've been waiting for years.
Time. Yeah. So in our monthly rotation of guest hosts, we decided to have you on. I'm curious because obviously I've always really been into true crime and spooky things and horror.
You are
and
not making that up. You have been.
You have always been very supportive.
Outwardly.
Maybe not. Yeah, right. Thanks. Maybe not interested, but like supportive.
Right. I try.
So, but you definitely are into true crime, I would say, as much as I am.
I would not say as much as you are.
Is anybody.
We have had some wonderful discussions over the years.
Was there like a case or something that happened that got you like interested in it, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Things will get my attention because they are like so out there. I just can't believe things happen.
Yeah.
And people do things like that. One of my stories is like that.
Yeah.
So yes, you will point out things to me too and say, hey, you should watch this. Or, well, heck, in the family, even Aunt Linda will send me these generally really graphic, horrible stories and said, send this on to Vicky.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, should we give background? You were a teacher forever?
Well, not forever.
You're not now, but...
But that's why I was telling you earlier that I can come on because I was a professional talker for a big chunk of my life.
It's true. And I inherited that.
Right.
Lucky me.
Better than the other way. I think.
That's true. Well, we have another great episode for you guys. If this is your first time listening, a special hello to you. Let's head over to the newsroom.
Unfit to breathe, our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad.
Okay, so we are now in a new year. And one of the things that I like to do, and I kind of wanted to highlight this at the top of the show, is look at the laws in Illinois that are going into effect. Because we are based in Illinois. And always January 1st, there's a bunch of new laws. This year, there's about 300
News
or so.
articles are out there, but I haven't read them yet, so this will be interesting.
There are, and I'm not obviously going to go, we do not have time to go through all 300. And there are some highlights. There's things like the banning books ban, which I think is great. It essentially just says you can't do a book ban in Illinois.
Right.
There's minimum wage increase. There's a bill that basically says if the heat index is above, I think, 90 degrees, the electric and gas company can't shut off your electric so that people have air conditioning, if you don't pay your bill or whatever, which is, obviously for extreme temperatures, but we saw a lot of that here.
Right.
The one thing that I did really want to highlight is a bill. It's SB 380, and essentially what SB is Senate Bill 380. Essentially what it does is it allows people a civil cause of action for fertility fraud. So this means that if you're a victim of fertility fraud, it gives you the ability to pursue action in civil court.
What would constitute fertility fraud?
That is a great question. So there have been in recent years many cases coming out of being revealed that doctors have been engaging in fertility fraud. Most of the time, it is doctors using their own sperm to inseminate people going to fertility clinics, not saying anything. There was a 2018 case filed against Gerald Mortimer. There was a case against Donald Klein in Indianapolis who used his own sperm. John Boyd in Vermont, and Jos Beek in the Netherlands. I mean, it's not even just centralized to the U.S. So the issue with this, one, is many times people don't find out until much later in life. And in a lot of these cases, they have found out due to things like ancestry or genetic testing, which is, in the 80s, when a lot of this 80s and early 90s, when a lot of this stuff was happening, and even back into the 70s, like that, nobody had access to that, really easy access.
Right.
So now people are finding out that they have these extra siblings that, all have the same dad.
Retroactively ask for child support.
That'd be interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work.
We all assume doctors are wealthy, but if you're supporting, 20 or 30 kids.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So in most of those cases, you don't have any course of action through the courts to hold somebody accountable, because it's just like not really a thing that the court system and the legal system has had to deal with or reckon with, because it wasn't really that common until now.
Right.
So Illinois is actually the first in the country to have a law like this, to provide course of action for people who are victims of fertility fraud.
Gotcha. We're number one.
We're number one, which is great. I mean, I think that's awesome.
Right.
I'm interested to see. I don't know specifically if there have been cases in Illinois. I'm sure there have. Nothing that I've seen that's been so massive that it has made the news. But yeah, I mean,
it'll be interesting because, again, I am of an age where all this fertility stuff has happened during my lifetime. There was no such thing back in the day.
Yeah. So with that, we are going to head over to Netflix and Kill, where this week we are talking about The Puppet Master Hunting the Ultimate Con Man on Netflix, which was a wild ride.
You suggested this, and I am not as big of a Netflix watcher as you are, but holy moly, this was crazy.
Yeah, and I think we might have talked about this on the show. There's something that is telling me that Janelle might have talked about this, or I listened to another podcast that I'm not sure, but I'm like, this sounds really familiar. But the story itself is crazy. It centers around Robert Hendy Freegard, who is this guy who was scamming people and hiding his identity. He was suggesting that he was part of a high-level Irish government. It was it was MI5.
Yes, MI5. He
right?
was on the other side. The anti.
That's it. And they were trying to find the IRA factions, and he's telling people that he's recruiting them into this MI5 program. And
I found it was interesting that the first person that they talked about was going to an agricultural college. And it was, they talked about, and at the time there were bombs going off. And what do you need for bombs but fertilizer and diesel fuel?
Yes.
So it kind of made sense that an agricultural school might be a place where people can get that.
Sure. And I mean, it is the lies were crafted so well, like you said, just to have enough truth.
Yes.
To be okay, maybe. This all sort of evolved into him, these people that he was traveling with, basically going into hiding a lot of times and then trying to bilk their families for money, to send them money for, quote unquote emergencies, or to pay for the classes to get reexamined for this MI5 which is wild to me.
And all these people were convinced that the IRA was after them.
Yes.
And they had to hide.
Yeah.
And they did it well, and they did it for a long time.
Yes.
I was kind of shocked at the energy it took for this guy to continue this for was like 10 years or something.
Yes. Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah. And he had multiple victims at the same time where he was like hiding people away and leaving them with like no food, no nothing, and
Locked
just like
in
a
a
room.
bathroom.
Yeah. Going to deal with some other part of his con, coming back to like try to start. There was the one who was like, he came back and was like, do you want to be my girlfriend? Which
Right.
was kind of, it was, the whole thing is very, very strange.
Creepy. Kind of
Super creepy.
And it is amazing in some regard that these people can be brainwashed to this extent because they seem like very normal, intelligent people. But again, just like we were talking about, there was enough of a little core of truth that made kind of sense, and they were protecting their families.
Yes.
If you don't hide with me, the IRA is going to come after your families and kill them.
Yes. Yeah. And he did get some time in prison. Which is also like the legal battle is kind of interesting. So he was charged with theft, deception, kidnapping by fraud in 2005. And then the kidnapping conviction got overturned in 2007.
Okay.
And a lot of that has to do with these people being adults and willingly going with him, right? Willingly in quotes, like
I'm kind of eye rolling now because, there's willingly. Yes, but if somebody has convinced you of something that is not true,
right.
I don't see how that's not taken into consideration.
It's like the brainwashing
Yes.
aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah. He did receive life in prison in 2005, but it was later reduced to 9 years in 2007 at the same time that they got rid of the kidnap conviction. I think that was the thing that made it such an extended sentence.
Okay.
He was apprehended again recently, September of 2022.
Okay.
I can't remember if this was in the documentary or not, but he was apprehended, ended up going to a court in Belgium. They were trying to get him extradited, and then he has actually been indicted on alleged attempted murder of persons holding public authority and is currently being held in pretrial detention.
Was there anything that you found as to crimes committed before he did this scam, let's say?
Like a smaller scam before?
Right. He seemed very organized and kind of had people figured out as to how he could convince them to do these things he wanted them to do.
Yeah, so his original career was a barman and a car salesman.
Oh, I
interestingly
remember that.
enough, yeah.
Yes.
And so he kind of like went from car, which is an interesting transition, from car sales to conning people, like very naturally, because I don't really see that he pretty much went 0 to 60, and the con was always that he was an MI5 agent, like going after the IRA. There was like no lead up to that. It was just
That's why it seems so weird that it would just come out of the blue that he hadn't done.
But I feel like the car sales is like kind of a tip.
Okay, but not all car salesmen are con men.
No, just a lot of them. They do have that reputation, though, for being
They do.
smooth and like,
They sell.
charismatic. Exactly,
He's
exactly.
just selling a story instead of a car.
Yes, exactly. So what did you, I really enjoy. I think it's worth a watch. It's really interesting.
I thought it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was one of those wild stories.
Yes, yeah. I agree. And it was like they had enough interviews and the way they structured everything with like what he was doing and the people who are trying to figure out where he's at. Like,
And it
was really
poor
good.
people who were conned for years, no contact with families, their mental health issues afterwards had to be ginormous.
Yes.
And I loved the dad that they talked to through the whole thing because he was sure his daughter was out there and was doing everything that he knew to do.
Yeah, he was doing real armchair detective work, which I love.
And he just it seemed like an average guy farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is The Puppet Master, Hunting the Ultimate Con Man. That's on Netflix. You can check it out. That being said, this is that part of the show where I say some content may not be appropriate for all listeners. It's at least on my end, it's actually pretty tame, violence-wise,
Mine is pretty tame, violence-wise also.
So, Mom, what are we talking about today?
Well, it's interesting. All the things you've talked about up till now kind of have connections with the story I'm going to tell you. It's kind of a wild story.
Okay.
I heard it first a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And when we talked about my coming to join you on the show, it was the first thing that popped into my head because it's such a wild story.
Okay.
I also want to say, by the way, hi, Janelle, and I hope you come back soon. I felt like I was doing a research paper for a master's class. So,
do you want to tell our listeners what the topic is for
the
today?
topic is medical crime, although I am going to veer off of medical crime partway through.
Okay.
You have talked about going down a rabbit hole, and this was an entire rabbit warren.
Yes.
That's a word we heard at our trivia
I didn't
night.
know that was the name for a rabbit hole.
It's a multitude of rabbit holes that
is a warren.
is a warren. So we're going to talk about a man named Paolo Macchiarini.
Okay.
Have you heard of this person?
I have not.
I will say that after I chose this topic, lo and behold, about a few weeks before we're recording,
Yes.
something came out on Netflix, a 3-part Netflix.
You were looking into it first for
I
the
was
record.
looking into it first, and I asked you, and you said, go for it.
Yes.
Now, have you ever heard of, there's a series called Dr. Death?
Yes. I have actually listened to that. Because that came out, like the podcast series came out like years ago. It was like 3 or 4 years ago.
So I know really nothing about it. Is it a video? I mean, is it on...
So it was a podcast series that was adapted into a TV show. And I think they've done a movie. Like, I think it's a TV show and a movie.
Okay, well, I think he's coming out on the TV show in an episode which is going to be released or may have been released already.
Okay.
So even
because they kind of changed it into like, originally Dr. Death was about one doctor that had done some medical scams. So I think they have like with the TV series, like adapted it to be like one a season.
Okay,
is
or
what
one
I'm
an
thinking.
episode
Yeah,
or
something like that. Yeah.
I've not seen it. I don't even know if it's out yet, but it is coming out as we're recording this very soon.
Exciting.
So I'm going to do my best.
I believe in you.
Okay, thank you. I will. And let me tell you, as a rookie mistake, this gets complicated.
Okay.
It also has a lot of European names in it.
You're going to feel my pain. We'll record and she will listen to an episode and be like, well, do you know that you pronounced such and such wrong? And I'm like, well, I do now. It's a struggle.
It is a struggle.
You got to write all the stuff down phonetically.
And there's medical things.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, so I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to circle around some things and come back. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Paolo Macchiarini. I looked up background family life, did not find a whole lot.
Yeah.
So he was born in Basel, Switzerland in August of 1958.
Okay.
The one thing I did see about his family is at one point in time, his father became ill, went to see doctors. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. Paolo began to treat him, and he died shortly after. And,
interesting.
That seemed to be something that weighed heavily on Paolo for the rest of his life.
So he just took the treatment on himself.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, if the doctors say we don't know what's wrong, he tried things.
Yeah.
So I do understand that. He is a thoracic surgeon.
Okay.
Now, the thoracic cavity of your body is everything that's like in the upper part of your body, above your diaphragm, enclosed by your ribs.
Okay.
So let's kind of put
Okay.
it in that context. I've heard that term, and I looked it up just
Yeah.
because I wanted to make sure I knew.
I would never have been able to
Gotcha.
get that.
So a little bit on his background. He received his medical degree in 1986 and a master's of surgery in 91 from the University of Pisa. Think Leaning Tower of.
Oh, okay.
He also went to the University of Franche-Comté in France,
Okay.
where he received a master's in 94 and a doctorate in 97 in organ and tissue transplantation.
Wow.
Now-
I mean, it sounds like the dude's got a lot of schooling. Fancy schooling. Fancy sounding schooling.
It is fancy sounding schooling, and I will say I don't know that anybody questions whether or not this person is intelligent. He seems to be very intelligent, very charismatic, very generous. It's said that he looks like George Clooney, and he does very handsome. He's the kind of person who is like a star when he walks into a room. He just has that magnetism.
Yeah. I have to look up a picture of this guy.
And I saw several pictures over the course of years, and I think as he got a little older, he got a little more handsome.
You think so?
I thought so, but
Paolo
then maybe
Macchiarini?
Macchiarini.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You see the
He's a
George-
good-looking dude.
He is.
He is a good-looking dude.
And yes.
I get it.
Yes.
I get it.
Okay. There was a lot about positions he held, and I'm leaving quite a bit of this out because there was some disagreement about positions he held, whether his, I'm going to call it a resume. I just heard the term CV, which is curriculum
Vitae.
vitae.
Curriculum vitae.
Vitae, and there's actually a woman on YouTube who does pronunciations, and there's a European pronunciation and there is an American pronunciation.
Yeah. I was so surprised because this came up at trivia like a couple weeks ago.
I am learning so much.
And
at
you
trivia.
guys did not know CV. And you know what? Truthfully, I feel like way more used in Europe. When they're talking about resumes, they're always talking about CVs and they don't almost ever use resume.
Right. And
So the stuff that this is like stuff that he self-reported on his resume is that
Right.
he's saying. So even like the
Right.
education is self-reported, or did that ever get verified?
Well, there's some discussion. He went to a school in the southeastern United States, and he said he received this degree from the school, and the school said, well, no, he only went here for a short amount of time and never completed his schooling. There's one interview he went to, and I'm trying not to get ahead of myself.
Sorry, I have a bad habit of doing
Well,
that.
obviously you inherited that too. So there's one time where he's applying for this rather prestigious position, and he was pretty much a shoo-in. A committee was formed to interview and review things and kind of rubber stamp. And he claimed to have been an associate professor at one of these schools I mentioned where he graduated, and someone on the committee was in school there at the same time and said, no, he was never an associate.
That's one of those things that I'm like,
school.
that is easily enough verifiable. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
a big enough claim that's like, okay, that's like easy to check.
Right. So I left a lot of the schooling out. He held a lot of different positions, and in Germany, in Barcelona, Spain, in London, in Italy.
Wow.
He worked in Russia. He travels the world. He is one of those people.
Okay.
In 2010, he was appointed as a visiting professor at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, with a part-time position at their affiliated Karolinska Hospital. Have you ever heard of Karolinska?
No. Is it like a big deal?
It is a big deal because it is people connected with Karolinska Hospital who select the Nobel Prize winner in physiology and medicine.
Okay.
And I heard someone describe it as the most expensive hospital in the world.
Oh, and it's not in the U.S.?
It is in Stockholm, Sweden.
That's shocking.
Not everything is in the U.S., but it's a big deal and a very prestigious location.
So if you were like in the medical community and somebody had that down as something on their CV, that would be like, oh, okay.
Yes, and this is verified. He was
Okay.
there, so this is not a made-up thing.
Okay.
Now, he burst onto the scene because he's been obviously doctoring for a while. In 2008, he burst onto the scene doing kind of new procedures in medicine. This is when things like regenerative medicine are starting, building body parts in the labs using stem cells.
I was going to say, is that like the stem cell research
Yes.
Okay.
This is kind of a big deal. He did a surgery on a woman, Claudia Castillo. It was at the hospital clinic in Barcelona, Spain. All of these surgeries I'm talking about today are dealing with the trachea, the windpipe.
Okay.
Okay. She had had tuberculosis. It had damaged her airway. What he was doing that was new was at this point taking a cadaver airway, trachea, chemically stripping it of its cells, and then using the stem cells of the patient, impregnating this cadaver trachea with stem cells and implanting it. So the idea is if your own stem cells then would regenerate on this trachea, you would not have to take the medication when you get...
Is it so like they don't reject the body parts and stuff?
Yes, you don't reject the body parts.
So you're essentially like changing the DNA of... maybe not DNA, but changing it to match your stuff.
Right,
on
to match
inside.
your stuff.
For all of us non-medical folk, you know.
Exactly. Again, rookie mistake. I went right into the medicine.
Don't worry, somebody will tell us if we get it wrong.
I believe you. It won't be me.
No, not this time.
Not this time. And after he would do surgeries, often within a very short while, he would write and publish about these surgeries because they were new. I mean, it was big news. I saw clips of news stories on like national news in the U.S. and elsewhere that, wow, this is a new thing that's happened. And he published this one in Lancet in 2008.
Okay.
And Lancet is a very well-known, well-respected medical journal.
I've even heard of it.
So you know how important and big it is.
Yeah.
Okay, this is number one. I'm going to go through several different people, and then I'm going to be circling back to some of them because they tie in a little bit later on. There is a Danilo Bernardes Pedrosa. He was a Brazilian in Italy, born in 1987. He had a damaged trachea incubation after a car accident in 2009. Very handsome young man. He had a trachea transplant in 2011. He seemed to be, that was in January of 2011. In March, he seemed to be recovering. Then he deteriorated again and died in April of that same year. I'm going to be rolling back to him and his mom in a bit.
Okay.
Now there's Andamarian Bene.
Okay.
He was born in 1973. He was from Eritrea, a country in northern Africa.
I've never heard of that.
I worked with a man from Eritrea.
Really?
Years ago before I married Dad.
Wow.
Yes. So I had heard of this country
I've never
before.
heard of that before.
He had cancer. He was operated in September 6th of 2011 at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm.
Okay.
Now, his surgery was a little bit different in that Dr. Paolo Macarena, he decided to start using lab-created plastic tracheas.
Okay.
And this man was the first one to actually have one of those.
Okay.
And again, all of these are like impregnated with the patient's stem cells. They're put in.
So they even do it with the plastic
They even do it with the plastic ones. Later on, I'm going to talk about a Bosse Lindquist, who is a documentarian for Swedish TV, who did a series on Swedish television. This man had several surgeries afterward to keep his airway open. He also died some years later. He was working on his doctorate in Iceland.
Okay.
And we'll come back to him also.
Okay.
Now there's Christopher Lyles. He was from Baltimore in the good old USA, born in 1981. He also had, they found a tumor on his trachea.
Okay.
He was operated on in November of 2011 at Karolinska Institute.
So wait, are these all happening in 2011? Like these are all happening right around the same
The
time?
ones I'm talking about, there are some in between.
Sure. But these guys are all kind of right around the same.
Right.
I just realized there were a lot of 2011s in there. So.
Well, and they're all going to tie in a little bit later on.
Okay.
I saw they interviewed this young man on the podcast that will be not podcast, I'm sorry, on the Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Anyway, looked like a very nice young man, had a daughter, just adorable. His family is trying to find something. He's told he has 6 months to live. He didn't look like it, though. I mean, he was just very lively, very positive.
Yeah.
And they find this doctor online, and the doctor says, I think I can help you. Assisting in this operation was a Philip Youngbluth, who was responsible for regenerating the trachea, putting the stem cells and things on.
Okay.
And then assisted with the operation. But by the way, he doesn't have a Swedish license to practice medicine.
Does he have any license to practice medicine?
He does. He is an official doctor, but
that's sketchy already.
There's
that makes
a lot
it a little
of this
like
that is sketchy.
Yeah.
Christopher had infections in his airway, had infections in his wound. He had operations. He had mucus clots, and they had to do some surgical procedures to remove those. He did finally return to the United States. He's something that he was very anxious to do. Mm-hmm. And he hemorrhaged severely not long, within a couple months of returning.
Oh, wow.
And passed away on March 5th of 2012.
Okay.
Now I'm going to get to Yulia Tulik. She is Russian.
Okay.
A young dancer. I will, again, circle back to her. She was born in 1979. She was in a car accident and had a tracheostomy, which is a hole in your throat.
Yes.
And there's like tubes involved.
Yeah.
So she was dealing with life pretty well, except, this doesn't make your life very good.
It's a burden.
It is a burden, for sure.
Yeah.
So she was operated on in June 19th of 2012 at the Cuban, I'm thinking it's Cuban, I don't want to say Cuban and get confused with another country, Kuban,
Okay.
Cuban Medical University in Krasnodar, Russia.
Okay.
She also had the plastic trachea that was impregnated with stem cells. Her story is told in a documentary called Experimenten, which I believe means the experiment. She died in September of 2014.
Okay.
Then we have Yasmin.
I'm not seeing a very high survival rate on this.
In your opinion, there's others who would disagree.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have Yasmin Centaur, born in 1990, Turkish. I found this interesting. She had damage to her trachea after a botched operation to fix hand sweating.
Okay, that is really interesting. And I know, I mean, obviously, I know
things happen.
things with like glands and stuff is like intermixed in different parts of the body. Like it's not exactly where you think it would be, too. Because I know that you've obviously got glands in your neck and in your armpits, like
right. And you're dealing with in surgeries, they insert things down your throat for your breathing and
that's
all of
true
this.
too.
And something happened.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Wild.
So she also had a plastic trachea inserted in August 7th of 2012. And it said something about a second plastic trachea graft the following year. That would have been July 9th of 2013. And it also saw something about it being removed. It talked a lot about medical issues that she had. Her heart stopped. She had like 91 surgical procedures. And I'm thinking some of these are maybe clearing the airways or whatnot. It said her airway needed to be cleaned every 4 hours.
Oh my
and
gosh.
that it was a very uncomfortable procedure. And this was every 4 hours.
Yikes.
It did say that she passed away on March 19th of 2017 after a lung trachea transplant at Temple University in Philadelphia.
Oh, we know someone from there.
So shout out to our friends in Philadelphia. Not the last connection we will have.
Oh, interesting.
Then there is Hannah Warren. Now, Hannah Warren is a toddler. She's a Korean Canadian, I believe living in Korea. She was supposed to be the first person to receive this plastic trachea, but this is experimental surgery, so in the U.S., the FDA did not allow this.
Yeah. I imagine age was a factor in that.
Possibly. It was also experimental surgery, and at the time, this hadn't been out there long enough for results.
Sure.
Although after a while, there were papers that were published, there were glowing reports out there.
Sure.
The FDA finally said, okay, we can do this. So Paula was brought over to Illinois, our home state.
Shout out.
A shout out to Illinois. We're not done with that yet. And I guess they could do temporary medical license or special permission in these cases. So he was granted
because he's not licensed in the U.S.
He's not licensed here.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. I didn't know that was a thing.
And I always think he was like a world-traveling doctor who is flying from here to there and everywhere. So this surgery was done at the Children's Hospital of Illinois, which is connected as part of St. Francis Hospital in Peoria.
Okay.
Again, a family connection that we have there.
Yeah.
And I will come back to her also because this is kind of where one of my stories splits off. She is also shown in the Netflix series and is adorable. She was born without a trachea, which I didn't know was a thing that could happen, had spent her whole life in the hospital. She was 2 years old at this time and was just lovely and full of life. And they showed her standing at her crib and she's making faces and just a real cutie.
Is this the Under the Knife documentary on Netflix?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes, it is.
It's like Under the Knife something.
I'm thinking the first two words. And it is Bad Surgeon, Love Under the Knife.
Yes, that's it.
Bad Surgeon, Love Under the Knife.
I don't know that we mentioned it yet, so wanted to make sure we got it in there.
Okay, so I'm going to circle back a little bit to some of these. He would do these surgeries, and later on, And again, I am not in the medical profession, and this is the upper echelon of the medical profession. So things are done on a level that I'm not used to. So you have this man who, after the surgery in 2008, gets the nickname of the super surgeon.
Oh, God.
He has obviously,
that's horrible.
when he does surgeries, he has other doctors who are on the staff that work with him.
Sure.
Okay, that makes sense. So when he does these, the reports come out. He's publishing papers shortly after he does the surgery, and it seems like a lot of these people do okay after the surgeries for a while.
Yeah.
But then they take a turn for the worse.
Right.
Okay, and most of these people do. But then you have him and his reputation and his good looks and his intelligence and his charisma and magnetic personality. So as he's doing surgeries, he seems to be there a lot in the beginning to convince people to do these. And then after the surgeries are done, he kind of takes off and leaves them in the hands of assistants.
So he doesn't really deal with any of the aftercare or
the after effects,
Yeah.
the trauma, the terrible things that happen.
Okay. I mean, dude's in it. He sounds very important.
He is.
He sounds very important.
He is very important.
Oh,
At
goodness.
least in his mind.
Of course.
So
in his mind. Yeah,
there's a lot of
accurate.
talk of these procedures not working well, people getting infections. These tracheas will collapse on themselves and,
oh my gosh.
and cut off the airways. Things are not very promising.
Yeah.
That news doesn't seem to really get out there.
Really?
Not very well.
Well, I mean, that's not as much as I could totally see that being something you just kind of don't include in your reporting.
Well, except you probably should.
I mean, you should. I
should.
agree. You absolutely should. But
I'm going to go back to this Eula Tulek.
okay.
At this point, when he was operating, a lot of the people he's operating on have health issues. That's why they're coming to see him. He, according to one person who had worked with him, said he wanted to try this surgery on people who were healthier. So this is why he ends up in Russia.
Okay.
He had done a presentation there, impressed the people who are there, was asked by this politician to come and do some surgeries at the hospital there. It becomes a pet project of Putin.
Oh, God.
He does this, they have like a lottery. So people are presenting their health issues and can you help me?
Yeah.
And they are out there saying, hey, choose me. I want to have this surgery. So this Eula Tulek, this young dancer, has a young son. She, again, she's living at home. She's taking care of her son. Her life is not terrific, but she is not at death's door.
Right.
And healthier than the other patients he's been working on.
Gotcha.
So that's how she was picked.
Okay.
After she has the surgery, they bring her out and present her, and she comes out and she can speak and says, okay, as soon as I recover and get healthy, I'm going to go back to school and I just want to play with my son and all of these things.
The very heartwarming story.
Exactly, very heartwarming. And of course, this they followed Apollo during the surgery for the documentary The Experiment or Experimenting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
okay.
right before this documentary comes out, the producers email her, how are you doing? Hope everything is going well.
Yeah.
Blah, blah,
just like
blah.
an update.
An update.
Email.
And she messages back and says, things are not well. Things are terrible. One of the doctors on the side said something about coughing up her own tissue. She
my
said,
gosh.
people do not want to be near me because I smell like I'm rotting.
Oh, no.
And she said, this trachea is shit.
Oh, no.
And she messages the director of this documentary, and the documentary goes out anyway. And of course, Yulia dies.
Did they not include any of that?
No, none of that was included.
That is interesting because, I mean, obviously there's like another implication here, right? Like Russia is known for controlling the narrative of things that are published.
I had never thought of it in
Yeah.
that way. And if this is a pet project,
Right.
and you're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah.
He actually, while he was in Russia, switched hospitals, and this grant money follows him to the next hospital. And
Okay.
of course, he's still this
Yeah.
big star surgeon because he's doing these wonderful new technologies in medicine, and all the reports are glowing reports of how well he's
Right.
doing.
So I can totally see that being a factor because, like, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of just state paid media happening. And especially if you're following this doctor, that's a big deal. Like,
Exactly.
that's a little sketchy.
Now, I'm going to go back to, there's 3 people, and it was this Yensem Satar and Christopher Lyles on the Andemarian Benet. Those were the 3 people who were at the Karolinska Institute. Now, this becomes interesting because, of course, Karolinska Institute and Associated Hospital are very well known. This doctor is very well known, Maccarini. So they have convinced him, oh, come and work with us. So you've got this good doctor working there. In the background, I get the impression that money will kind of follow, and glamour and glory and attention to this institute with this wonderful new procedure.
Yeah, I can see that.
None of these 3 people have done very well.
Right.
And in fact, I believe they all die. Their total were 7 with this, I believe 8 with this plastic trachea altogether, 7 of whom die. 1 has it removed and was still alive.
And that's the one you said was interviewed in the documentary? Or no? Okay. Different guy.
All of those.
Okay.
have
Yeah,
since
when you were going
passed
through
away.
them, it sounded like, see, this is what I said. It sounded like the success rate was not
Success rate was
Great.
not very good.
Yeah.
So after a while, there are 4 doctors that are working with him at Karolinska, and they start to get a little bit suspicious. And one of them talks about being at a meeting where Dr. I'm always forgetting his name, Maccarini, where Dr. Maccarini is presenting, and he's talking about these people that he's operated on and what the procedure is and how well they're doing and all of this. And the one doctor is listening to him and said, in this kind of presentation, you go back and talk about your research before this and your tests you have done before this. So before this, what would you do you think? What do you think you would do before you were doing this on humans?
Doing this on animals.
Never happened.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
And-
okay.
and Paulo
That's
is-
kind of a big bomb.
kind of a big bomb, and he's intimating in interviews, what do you mean? Well, no, you just don't see this. Oh, this is in Russia, they have our research. Nothing has ever come forward. It wouldn't be something you'd hide.
Right.
One of the doctors talks about the first patient, Andemarian Benet, that actually some of the samples were switched, so it showed that he had a better prognosis than he actually had.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we're kind of getting...
Wow, this has gotten really sketch. And that's crazy because that is really just a regular part of medical research. Like, you don't start your testing on humans.
Right.
Ever.
And these are the upper echelons. This isn't just some little, podunk place in a...
I can't believe nobody had verified that beforehand.
He's the super doctor.
So what?
He's had glowing reports. Everything he
I'm
is
skeptical
doing...
of everything, though. So I'm just like, I don't really
Exactly.
care.
Exactly.
Give me proof.
So these doctors go to, and they said they had to do this research, and they went through all of these procedures, and they found all these discrepancies, and they found things that were left out.
Uh-oh.
And they go to the board at Karolinska Institute and say, we have these issues. We think there's research fraud. And they say, okay, something's going to happen. Nothing happens.
Oh.
And in fact, then Karolinska Institute comes out and says, we support Dr. Macchiarini.
Oh, no.
And these people that are putting this out there are just, they're jealous. They have a vendetta against him. They come out to the press, don't listen to any of this. It's just people with a vendetta.
Yikes.
One of them talks about getting hauled into the police station and interviewed about stealing research materials.
This is not a good look
This
for
is
such
not
a
a good look.
prestigious, supposedly prestigious. I'm sure they still are, but like, yikes.
Now, in the background, I'm going to bring another person in. There's a Bose Lindquist, this journalist who is looking at all of this going on and getting some idea that there's something not right. And he's one who does some research. He is working with another person who goes to interview the mother of Eula in Russia and hears this horrendous story.
Yeah.
And all of this. And eventually, Lundquist connects with the surgeons, finds out more background, finds out proof. These surgeons were talking about having to sneak this research. They were afraid if anybody knew that the Karolinska Institute would destroy the evidence. And they actually got pictures of Andemarian Bene, remember he's the first recipient of the plastic trachea?
Yeah.
That they had pictures of the trachea after a while, and it was just a piece of plastic. There were no cells growing. There was nothing happening.
That's what I was wondering, because I know they can make like plastics that more, at least now, they can make plastics that more closely mimic like human tissue that are still plastics, right? But I'm like, these are the first ones they're coming out with. Are they literally just like plastic tubes they're putting in?
I think the idea was this would actually become the trachea after a while, but there's no blood supply to it. So
Right.
I don't know how does
that just integrate
was
into your
going
body
to work.
Yeah.
So they team up and end up doing a documentary that comes out in Sweden. The documentary, it says they gathered info against Paulo. They had a biopsy from the first patient that was switched. They had video clips of this tube rotting inside the one patient. Everything was just awful.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to take a little detour because I want to stop with this documentary coming out in Sweden, and I want to back up to the patient Hannah Warren, the 2-year-old. Okay, so at this time, the early 2000s, this regenerative medicine became a hot topic. So in New York, NBC decided they wanted to do a documentary about regenerative medicine.
Sure.
They had a producer, Benita Alexander, they did some research and whose name pops up at this Pablo Macchiarini. They decide to do a documentary on his treatment of Hannah. So they meet up. The father of her child, her ex-husband, is being treated for brain cancer.
Okay.
She and her ex-husband have a good relationship, and everything is fine in that area. That her daughter is very attached to the ex-husband and all this. But of course, this is causing a lot of stress in her life. But she is going on as a professional producer in the world of news and media.
Sure.
She meets Paulo, and immediately there's a connection there. He's a very handsome and whatnot person. So she also immediately, she says, the second thought I have after our eyes connecting and there being a spark is, nope, it is very unprofessional of me
Agreed.
to get involved with the subject of a story.
Yeah.
So she does not for a while. They go through this procedure as they are kind of finishing up with the surgery with Hannah. She's in Peoria with him. Sparks are continuing to fly a bit, and they kind of have this flirtatious and kind of romantic, and a relationship begins.
Okay.
She, I think, realizes it probably isn't the best professional move she's ever made in her life, but she also feels that a lot of this series is finished. They're kind of toward the end of it.
Yeah.
So they keep the relationship secret. And it continues for a while. And holy moly, what she shows of their relationship with Paulo is he's this wonderful, romantic, charming, messaging her. They're living separately, obviously. He's traveling the world. She has her job.
Yeah.
But he flies her on vacations. He's very generous. So he's taking her all over the world. They show her in Venice in a gondola on the canal.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad about that.
I wouldn't be mad about that either. And as time progresses and the relationship develops, he eventually asks her to marry him.
Okay.
And she says yes, and he buys her he presents her with this beautiful ring that he says eventually tells her it's like $100,000 diamond ring.
God.
And it's gorgeous.
You could do so much with
absolutely gorgeous.
$100,000.
They do keep this under wraps because, again, this documentary is called Leap of Faith. It was hosted by Meredith Vieira.
I don't know who that is.
Well, people in my generation would have heard of it.
Okay.
It's a 2-hour special. It was kind of a big deal. Anyway, they get engaged. They're still kind of keeping this on the down low because of the professionalism and all of that.
Yeah.
And she is divorced, and he has said something about his divorce being final and all of this too. So Paolo wants a big Italian wedding.
Okay.
And that's going to be an issue. Catholic Church, divorced people remarrying.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of an issue. He said, don't worry. I'm going to take care of everything. I don't want you to worry about anything except getting the invitations.
Okay.
And getting your wedding dresses and all the bridesmaids' dresses and all of those things.
Yeah.
And she's kind of a take-charge person. It was hard for her to let this go, but her friend said, oh my gosh, he has beautiful taste.
Yeah.
He's going to do this right. Don't worry. Take care of what he said.
Sure.
And he said, don't call these places. I want this to be a surprise, blah, 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 blah. So she proceeds. Somewhere I read something about the wedding invitations were $10,000.
Oh my God!
Gold embossed lambskin something.
Absolute excess.
So very excessive. The dresses are a haute couture from a well-known person in New York.
Whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. Rich people shit is what that is.
So somewhere along the line, I believe it was shortly after he proposed, which I think was on Christmas Day, and he decided he needed to leave like New Year's Eve, and she's questioning, why do you have to leave? She's still in the glow of this engagement and this wonderful thing. Well, I have people I have to work on. I have surgeries I need to do, and I shouldn't be telling you this, but I'm actually a member of this network of doctors who work on leaders around the world.
What? Okay.
And he mentions some names like the Clintons.
Okay.
So at some point he said, well, I have to, at one point in time he said, well, I have to, Bill Clinton's kind of a friend of mine. He wants me to go and have a look at something Hillary's having problems with. He talks about the Emperor of Japan, the Obamas.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of name dropping. There was somebody they named in France, and I don't know all the leaders of France at that time, but I'm sure it was a higher up.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I have connections at the Vatican. I'm going to go and see if they can find a priest who will marry us.
Okay.
And he calls back some time later, I'm sure a few days or whatever, and he said, I have wonderful news. The Pope is going to marry us.
Okay.
Now, at this point, she feels
That's
a little
unbelievable.
she's like, okay, this is a little unbelievable. I'm not
I'm
Catholic,
glad at least
I'm divorced.
literally the Pope being at their wedding is the thing that she's like, okay, now that
This
I
is
just
over
don't
the
believe.
top.
I'm at least she's there.
Yes. And she Googles, does the Pope marry people? Well, it turns out a month before, the Pope had married 20 couples, and these were couples that were a bit outside the norm, like they had lived outside of wedlock, they had children outside of wedlock. This is Pope Francis. He's a little more progressive.
He's the one Pope that I'm like, you're okay. You're okay.
So she said, well, the Pope does marry people. Okay, so now as this progresses.
Sure.
Now we all of a sudden more information pops up that Andre Bocelli is going to be singing at the wedding. Elton John is going to be playing. And I don't remember if it was the night before at a party or was going to be playing at the reception.
Yeah.
John Legend's name got brought up as playing. So this is the wedding of the century. Mm-hmm. The wedding is going to be held at the Pope's summer house.
Right.
It's a lovely place. It's a lovely, lovely place. Paulo has rented a castle nearby where guests can stay.
Okay. So the wedding's going forward.
The wedding is going forward. By the way, the Leap of Faith documentary also comes out.
Yeah.
And is... There. It was a little bit interesting because there was an article I read in Vanity Fair that talks about there's a discrepancy, I guess, because she did finally have to come out to the people she worked with and her bosses about this relationship she was having that was a little on the unprofessional side at the time. Mm-hmm. And it did cause a bit of anxiety and, consternation in the upper echelons. But now that she is getting married to Paulo, now they're talking about where they're going to live. And he said, well, come, you're going to move into my house in Barcelona.
Okay.
And they had planned several trips to Barcelona, but something always seemed to come up and they never actually made it there. But she saw pictures of this house and it's up on a hill with this view of the ocean. And it's fantastic. So she makes the decision, a tough decision. She's been working as a producer at NBC for quite a few years. She decides she's going to quit her job. She pulls her daughter out of school, and it's a private school in New York, tough to get into, and, turns in her notice, quits her job. The day after she quits her job, she goes with some friends for a spa day, and she gets done with the spa day. She pulls out her phone, and there's an email from one of her friends that just says, the Pope. And she opens it up, and it says, on the day that you're planning on being married, the Pope is going to be in South America. And that's been planned for a long time.
Okay.
She said at that point, she realized that all of this was not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Oopsie.
this was like and she had supported him and helped him and all of this.
Yeah.
So he questions. He happened to be in New York, comes over, and she's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, why are you doing this to me? What is going on? And he's like, no. This is all Vatican politics. I didn't invite the previous Pope to the wedding, and he's mad. He had originally said that the Pope was going to marry these two divorced Catholics to set a precedent for marrying divorced people.
Yeah.
And that there were people in the church politics that didn't like that. And they were trying to stop it, and that's why they were doing this. So he had good excuses in his mind for all of these things happening. Well, she kind of at that point said,
Yeah.
get out.
Yeah. Good. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. And at this point, she's trying to put her life together.
Yeah.
This was like 2 months before the wedding.
Okay.
By the way, so it's fairly close.
Yeah.
On what would have been her wedding day, she and two good friends of hers go to Barcelona. She said, you know, there's something weird here that we never completed these trips to Barcelona.
Yeah.
I'm going to go find out what's going on.
Okay.
Two friends of hers go, have this girls' trip to Barcelona. It has video of the two friends and her in a car driving up to Paulo's house. At that point, she is like so stressed she doesn't get out. She's wearing this blonde wig as a disguise.
Yeah.
They were drinking in the car as they're going to kind of get their courage up and whatnot.
Classy.
The two girls go up to the door, ask for Paulo. He comes out. She says, I see him come out. And then not long after, two little children come out.
Oh, my God.
And she hears the children call him Papa. Lo and behold, he's been married for 30 years.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So this whole thing is just... I did skip one little part. Remember when she was going to kick him out?
Yeah.
He told her that there were some other things that he hadn't told her that she shouldn't know, and that he actually was a doctor, and this network of doctors was actually sponsored by the CIA,
Okay.
and that he was actually a sniper.
Oh, my God. Okay.
So I appreciated your earlier Netflix
Yeah.
and kill, because all of this ties into all the stuff that we talked about before, and it gets pretty crazy. So, anyway.
That's wild.
It is a very wild
So he just
story.
has kept his one wife in Barcelona this whole time.
Yes. They talk in the video about him having five cell phones. He speaks...
That would honestly, having more than one cell phone
He
would
speaks
immediately...
5 or 6 different languages. So he said, well, this is my phone for when I'm talking in Russian.
You don't
this
need
is
that.
my phone.
No,
Anyway.
you don't need that. You don't.
Yes.
Nobody needs
Yes.
that. You just need one phone.
Now, I am going to stop at this point and make another quick U-turn. I said I was going to talk about this Danielo Bernades Pedrosa, who was in 2011. He had the accident and he had the trachea replacement.
Oh, yeah. Like
Okay.
the damaged trachea from surgery?
Damaged trachea. No, he was
Not
in a
from
car
surgery.
accident.
Oh, okay.
And he started to get better, then took a real slide detour.
Yeah.
After this, the mom brought charges against the hospital,
Okay.
and as part of the charges, they also went against Paolo Macchiarini.
Okay.
Well, he was very present before the surgery, and after the surgery, he called her and would, console her, and he called her and was trying to help her get through, and he started calling her every day. Mm-hmm. By the way, over a course of time, they also started a relationship.
What? Okay, I did not see that coming.
Right. So
That's
while she's
wild.
charging the hospital, she's being very supportive of Paolo and how wonderful, and he's a super surgeon. And
So was she in a relationship with him when she brought suit against him? in the
I
hospital?
don't know exactly the timeline for
Yeah.
that. It seemed like it was brought against the hospital and he was just kind of included.
Okay.
The relationship was going on while he was under this legal charge.
Gotcha.
Which
Okay.
eventually was dismissed, but they continued this relationship. She is in Florence, Italy, I believe, in an apartment, and they have a daughter.
Okay.
Somewhere along the line, I did see that he had 5 kids. I only have heard about 3. I do not know where the other 2 come from.
Oh, wow.
Now,
right.
about the time she finishes this relationship, she's thinking, he has lied to me about everything. He has lied about everything. What is he lying about in his professional life? And she has a friend who has a connection at Vanity Fair. She does a interview, and the story comes out in Vanity Fair about all of this relationship and romance, almost call it a romance scam.
Yeah.
I found a very interesting quote in the Vanity Fair article that was written by Adam Sorolsky, and it is in my sources that you can find. It says, to understand why someone of considerable stature could construct such elaborate tales and how he could seemingly make others believe them, I turn to Dr. Ronald Schouten, a Harvard professor who directs the law and psychiatry service at Massachusetts General Hospital. We're taught, here's the quote, we're taught from an early age that when something is too good to be true, it's not true, he said, and yet we ignore the signals. People's critical judgments get suspended. In this case, that happened at both the personal and institutional level. That's the end of his quote. And then it says, though he will not diagnose from a distance, Schouten, who is one of the nation's foremost authorities on psychopathy, observed, quote, Macchiarini is the extreme form of a con man. He is clearly bright and has accomplishments, but he can't contain himself. There's a void in his personality that he seems to want to fill by conning more and more people, end quote. Then the author asks, when I asked how Macchiarini stacks up to, say, Bernie Madoff, he laughed and said, quote, Madoff was an ordinary con man with a Ponzi scheme. He never claimed to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He didn't suggest he was part of a secret international society of bankers. This guy is really good.
Oh, that's so true, though. That's so, I love Bernie Madoff.
I know.
That is so true.
I thought I had to bring
Wow.
that in. Now, shortly thereafter, remember the documentary they're doing in Sweden?
Yes.
Somebody talks to the producer there and says, hey, wait a minute, you should see this article that just came out in Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
So now he has all this medical fraud and questions and whatnot, and then she has this whole personal side that are now all connected. So all of this came out. Now we go back to the Institute in Sweden.
The Karolinska?
It's the Karolinska Institute.
Karolinska. I was
Yes.
close.
Well, now comes, at this point, they are pretty,
They have to be shitting their pants because they're like, we really backed the wrong horse on this.
they did, when they're expecting him to be kind of this, financial person that's going to bring them all the
grant money.
grandeur and grand
yeah.
money and all of that.
Yeah.
So he does finally get fired.
Okay.
The
it seems to me like there needs to be something more, but all right.
Much of the leadership ends up resigning, including some of the people that are sitting on the Nobel Prize Committee.
Really?
Yep. On June, I believe Pablo gets finally brought to court.
Okay.
On charges of aggravated assault.
Do you know where he was brought to court?
This was in Sweden. These are on the 3 people that were operated on at Karolinska.
Okay.
They bring charges, but part of the issue is, as it comes out, he ends up being guilty on one count of causing bodily harm. His sentence is suspended. And it's
Okay.
something like, as long as he doesn't do anything like that there for 2 years, he's cleared.
Correct.
Okay.
But that just applies to Sweden.
That just applies to Sweden.
Okay.
So, of course, some of the people into background knowledge, they're very disappointed and they, can't believe this. Part of it comes to that people are arriving to him already being very sick, and these are last desperate measures and all of that. Eventually, this ruling goes back to court. A couple of years later, he gets brought up again on these same charges.
Okay. In Sweden?
In Sweden.
Okay.
And he is found guilty of aggravated assault on all three.
Okay.
And he was convicted and serving 2 years and 6 months in prison.
Okay.
I did find that, and I thought this was interesting, that the prosecution and Paulo himself have both appealed this verdict. And I find it interesting that both sides appealed.
Yeah, so that's actually something you can't do that in.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a little confused on this.
Okay.
Both appealed that previous conviction.
Yeah.
And that's why he was retried and resentenced and got then he lost, so I'm sure he's sorry he brought it up again, and that's when he got the 2 years and 6 months in prison, although he has appealed this conviction to the Supreme Court in Sweden.
Yeah, so in the US you can't do that in criminal court, but you can do that in civil court, and it is kind of a double-edged sword because like if you appeal, say you get maximum damages or something, and you appeal that, like that could be raised. Like that could be for either side. It could go either way. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's interesting that because I'm assuming these were criminal charges because you said he was serving time. So like it's interesting to me that they can appeal that for a criminal charge, but that's just a difference in legal system,
Yes.
It's a little weird.
So Bad Surgeon, Love Under the Knife on Netflix. When I watched it, I was thinking of the one you had me do, the Puppet Master.
Yeah.
Because it is as wild of a ride as
crazy.
that one. And I apologize for going on. I just find this story crazy.
Wow. Good job.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, the ring was not worth $100,000. She had it appraised; it was worth $1,000, and she threw it into the river.
I mean, that's I get it. I get it. It's fine. I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So when we had talked about what we were going to do for the show, you had mentioned that it was also part romance scam.
Yes.
So that is actually what I leaned into was the romance scam part of it.
Ought to be good.
Yeah. And mine is kind of a shorter story. So I wanted to start out with some sort of interesting statistics on romance scams in the U.S.
Okay.
So according to the FTC in 2022, nearly 70,000 people reported a romance scam with losses of approximately $1.3 billion.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Holy moly. And I wonder how many were not reported.
Exactly. Yes. The average loss was about $4,400 on average. The top favorite lie, which I found kind of interesting. The top favorite lie from romance scammers is I or someone close to me is sick, hurt, or in jail.
Right.
Which makes sense. Followed closely by I can teach you how to invest your money.
Yes, I've heard of both of those.
Yeah.
I always thought if I end up on a website and somebody is going to do, I would like to get to know you better. It's like, sure, great, but no upfront that I'm not giving you money for anything.
Yeah, literally. Right. That's my feeling. 40% of people who lost money in romance scam report that the contact started on social media. as you would guess. And the preferred payment method as of 2022 was cryptocurrency.
Ooh.
I know, changing times. The second one was like wiring money. So, I mean, it's literally like cryptocurrency and then the old way of sending money.
No gift cards?
No gift cards. And then reports, are you familiar with the term sextortion?
I can imagine what it is.
Yeah. So it's basically getting people to send you nudes, nude photos, and then using that as blackmail to have them send you money.
Right.
So they call that sextortion. But reports of that have increased 8 times.
Okay.
Since the previous. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
She just never put those pictures out there for anybody.
Exactly. So even though this is kind of a shorter story, I still think it's really important that we're talking about it because we're going to be talking about what may be the most prolific romance scammer, Patrick Giblin.
Okay.
Have you heard of him before?
I don't know, but start talking and I'll catch up.
Because this is funny to me because your doctor, like he had the charisma and everything, but he also had the looks. This guy does not have it at all.
Well, a lot of times the scammers are not using their own picture and they don't actually meet people in person.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, he was not. Okay. He's not it. But this is also a very, very like recent scam. So there's not a ton of background information on Giblin himself. So we're just going to jump right into it. So Giblin's first arrest was in 1989. According to the Daily Beast, he was arrested for, quote, convincing at least 10 women in New York to run up large credit card bills for him and then never repaying them, end quote. Okay. Although it's really like, I could not really find what the result of those charges were. Between 1989 and 1998, Giblin was convicted on over 30 crimes. Most of them were like petty theft.
Okay.
And there was a sexual assault in 1990, but other than that, it was like pretty minor stuff.
Well, sexual assault.
I said other than that. Other than that.
Okay.
But Giblin returned to his larger financial crimes when, again from the Daily Beast, in 1995, quote, he allegedly persuaded at least 2 victims to wire him money and was busted targeting at least one more woman in 1997.
Okay.
For this, Giblin received 9 months in prison for grand larceny. So he did get a little prison time. Now, following his release, it did not take very long for him to get right back into scamming when, according to police, he managed to get away with $31,000 from 20 women across the U.S. by meeting them through a dating service. On these dating sites, including Lava Life and Quest Chat, neither of which I have ever heard of.
I don't know any romance dating.
You haven't been on the dating sites?
Not for, well, when I was dating, they hadn't invented computers yet.
No, they would have been like newspaper dating ads, right?
Oh, there might have been. Yeah. I don't know.
Not that, but again, like not that you were really on that scene because like.
Right. I mean, I've been off the market for like 50 years.
Yeah. So on these dating sites, Giblin presented himself as a charismatic man, and he reassured potential marks that their physical appearance wasn't really an issue. It doesn't really matter. He also created numerous accounts to target the U.S. and Canada, so expanding the operation. According to CNN, Giblin would, quote, message women on the sites, tell them he was seeking a long-term relationship with a real, true, genuine woman, and then exchange phone numbers.
Okay.
And Giblin was able to build rapport with these women by spending large amounts of time talking to them on the phone. And once he felt like there was a good rapport, that's when Giblin would start asking them for money, often claiming that he was in some sort of financial crisis, like his car had broken down, or, quote, needing funds to free up winnings from a gambling tournament.
Gotcha. Yep.
Like, please pay. Which honestly reminds me of like the people having to pay for like the MI5 classes, like to do, like it's that kind of vibe almost.
Yes. Or you won the lottery, but you have to pay these taxes.
Pay the taxes,
first.
yeah. Which is just absurd.
Yeah.
Giblin would request money to be wired to him via MoneyGram or Western Union, even like giving instructions to the women who were like, I'm not familiar with wiring money. He'd be like, don't worry, I'll tell you exactly what to do every step of the way. Of course, authorities were keeping an eye on him because he had just been to prison for grand larceny. And they knew at this point that he was pretty much back to his old scamming ways. And in 2001, police followed Giblin to Atlantic City, where he was arrested, later pleading guilty to 2 counts of grand larceny, although he blamed his predilection for crime on his gambling addiction.
Gotcha. As other people have done.
Yeah. And that's not to like delegitimize gambling addictions. Like there are people with I think he does have a real problem with this, but like there's something to be said for like
Self-control
and like owning up to your crimes.
Right.
Not being like, it's not me, it's the gambling addiction.
Yes.
Like, no, it's you. As part of his plea deals in this case, Giblin agreed to pay back his victims and seek treatment. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison, which was time that he had already served while he was awaiting trial, as well as probation. But if you can spot the pattern, you would know that this is not the end of all of this.
You go with what you're good at.
Yes. I don't know that I guess he was good at this.
Well,
but
except he keeps getting arrested.
Right. Now, in October 2003, a woman named Carolyn Corcoran began communicating with Giblin after meeting him through Quest Personals.
Okay.
Corcoran had recently lost her child in a car accident, lost her job, and was helping care for her father who had terminal cancer. This was a really common thing. Like, Giblin was going after these women who were vulnerable or just, like, not in ideal
And that
positions.
actually ties in with Paolo, because if you think of these women, the one ex-husband was dying from brain cancer, the woman's whose son he treated.
Yes.
He was supporting her after the death of her son.
Yes.
Yeah, vulnerability.
Yes. During one of their conversations, Corcoran mentioned she had received $20,000 from her son's life insurance policy, which was enough to get Giblin's ears to perk up.
I bet.
And he soon was claiming that he was on his way to her in Houston, like, I'll be there soon. But partway into his drive, Giblin called Corcoran in a panic saying that the tires had blown out on his car, which I was thinking about this as I was writing, and I was like, all of them at
the
once?
same time?
Wow.
No
what
spare?
are the chances? So he called her, said, yep, all of my tires blew out, and that asked her to lend him some money and he would pay her back when he arrived. So she did. Giblin never made it to Houston. And just a couple of weeks later, Corcoran received another call from Giblin claiming that he had been arrested and was asking for help with bail.
Okay.
Corcoran agreed to help him out, but when she had tried to go to the ATM, there was a $400 withdrawal limit.
Okay.
And which was not enough to like pay the bail.
Right.
So she told this to Giblin. He instructed her to go to Walmart and was like, here's what you got to do. You go to Walmart, you buy a TV with your debit card, and then you go to a different Walmart and return it for cash.
He knows how it goes.
Scammer's gonna scam, man. So as Giblin is explaining this, she's like, I am not gonna do that. Like, that's not it for me. So she starts pushing back, is like refusing to go along with it anymore. And this sort of sends Giblin into a rage, and he starts threatening to kill her father.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in today with people threatening to kill family members.
Yeah. So believing that he would, in fact, like kill her father,
Right.
Corcoran sold her car and then sent the money to Giblin, sent the cash. In total, she ended up giving him $18,000. She was essentially left penniless. She had nothing left after that.
This often happens to people who don't have a whole lot to start
Yeah,
with.
she did not have a lot to start with at all. And like I said, she had lost her job and she was like, yeah. So this is just one example of at least 100 women who were scammed by Giblin between 2000 and 2005. So 5 years, 100 women,
Wow.
at least. There might be more.
Oh, I'm sure.
Authorities definitely believe there were more victims because, of course, this type of crime, like people are really embarrassed to come forward about
Yes.
it. They don't want to admit that they were tricked. They don't want to admit that they lost money. Like there's a lot of embarrassment attached to this. And
I just read something that if you tell a family member what happened, that you were scammed or whatever, there's 50% less chance that it will happen again.
yeah, because now you have somebody saying, be careful.
Yes.
This is what happened last time. Pay attention to
Yes.
this.
Yes. Or maybe
Interesting.
you end up admitting to yourself what happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Interesting.
these scammers are professionals, though. It's not, you didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. In most of these cases,
No.
you're dealing with somebody who's manipulating you, and people are embarrassed because, well, they should have been smarter.
Yeah.
No, these people are manipulating you.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are causing the trouble. It's not you.
Yeah, intelligence doesn't really play into it at all. It's the same thing
No.
with like people joining cults. Like it's not necessarily an intelligence thing. It is
Right.
people being in the right state of mind at the right time to be vulnerable to
Right.
manipulation. Like
Right.
it really could happen to
So if
anybody.
it happens to you, tell somebody.
Yes. Giblin was arrested again in Atlantic City in 2005, where he was charged with 21 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, and extortion.
Gotcha.
At his trial and sentencing hearing, a number of victims and witnesses testified, including a cashier from Caesars Atlantic City Casino's cash wiring service, who said Giblin was her best customer.
Okay. That should, alarm bells.
Yeah. There were, as I was looking through her testimony, there was another section where she talks about he had like a test question that he would ask to like try to get this money, and he would come back multiple times a day. And she even remembered there was a time where it was like the third pickup of a day and he had gotten the money and he was like pumping his fist in the cash money place and went, yes,
Like he
3 times in a
won.
day.
Jackpot.
Literally said 3 times in one day before like
Gotcha.
leaving
Well,
the
he's
cash
At a
place.
casino, that happens.
I guess, but like that's a big red flag.
It is.
Corcoran even spoke at this sentencing hearing saying, quote, "There will never be another man in my life. Patrick took everything I had, self-esteem, money, everything," end quote. For this time, he received 9.5 years in prison and 3 years parole. And as a part of his plea deal, Giblin had to admit that he had stolen more than $200,000 from various victims and was sent to federal prison in Greenville, Illinois.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there he remained until 2012 when he was placed in. You thought that was the end of it, right?
did. I thought that was the end of the story.
Never. He was there until 2012 when he was placed in a residential re-entry program in Philadelphia.
Gotcha. We're back in Philly.
Back in Philly. The program was run at Lutheran Treatment Center. It offered addiction therapy and work reentry training to help inmates make a smoother transition back into society. The center had granted Giblin a day pass to look for a job in Atlantic City.
I'm rolling my eyes as you speak.
Which in hindsight and like knowing his history, there's part of me that's like, wouldn't you know his history and
You would think so.
specific, like that he's been arrested in Atlantic City, not once, but like multiple times.
Right.
And is claiming to have this gambling addiction.
It's like giving an alcoholic a job at a liquor store.
Right. I didn't understand that one. I'm like, that was a terrible idea.
Yes.
So they give him this day pass. He goes to look for a job in Atlantic City. However, Giblin never returned.
Oh.
And he became a fugitive at that point. Because obviously he's still
Right.
under federal
Right.
care.
Right.
So it only took a month for authorities to track him down at a budget hotel called Roadaway Inn in Atlantic City. He was
Okay.
still there.
Still there.
Upon a search of the room, U.S. Marshals discovered a notebook with names of women he had begun scamming while he was on the run. Again, from the Daily Beast, quote, Giblin had made a log of their hobbies, physical descriptions, and where they lived. Investigators said, has savings account. He allegedly wrote next to one woman's name. Next to another, he penned home paid off and not a gold digger. Investigators also found a cell phone and money transfer receipts.
Okay.
So he had to keep a notebook to keep all of the
How
women
often
straight.
have you said, don't keep a journal? Don't keep a
Literally,
journal."
I was just talking to Tommy about this over the weekend. Like, you don't record your crimes.
Right.
Period.
Yes.
Ever.
Not that we're giving advice.
No, not on how to do crimes.
Yes.
But if you are, no, don't. Actually, don't.
Don't do the crime. Don't do the crime.
For this arrest, so Giblin was arrested and he eventually ended up pleading guilty to prison escape, and he received another 18 months in prison.
Okay.
This time, Giblin was released on supervised release in 2013 in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
He was required to notify his probation officer of any plans to leave the state, but he obviously didn't care because Giblin was arrested in a hotel in New York later. This time it was discovered that between the start of his supervised release in January 2013 and December 2014, Giblin stole $40,000 from at least 10 women in 5 states. I know.
Is he traveling to these states?
No.
They're sending him.
They're
wiring
sending him
the
money.
Okay.
Yeah. This time, Giblin pled guilty to 1 count of interstate travel and intent to launder money, receiving 5 years in prison. As we all know, 3 years later, so that was, he received that in 2017. 3 years later, 2020, world's hit by a global pandemic. And the U.S., which is the country with the largest incarceration rate in the world, is sort of forced to evaluate how many people they have crowding the prison system during a time of social distancing. At this point, and sort of as a result of the pandemic, there was sort of a period where they released a lot of nonviolent offenders in order to control the population in the prisons on the basis of public health. And so because of this, Giblin was approved to be transferred to a halfway house in Newark, New Jersey.
This sounds like a repeat.
There is literally, I'm like, is nobody reading his file? Like, this all has to be in there.
Sure.
Because he's been convicted of all of this stuff.
But
so I'm like...
It's not a violent...
Right. Right. So in July 2020, prison workers escorted Giblin to the airport where they watched him get on the plane. There was supposed to be a stopover in North Carolina, and then the plane would arrive in Newark. When the plane arrived, Giblin was not on it.
Okay.
Between April 2019 and March 2021, including some of the time that he was in prison and a portion of the time that he was on the lam, Giblin defrauded around 12 women out of more than $37,000. And can you guess where they found him this time?
At a casino?
In Atlantic City. Yeah, once again, authorities tracked Giblin down to Atlantic City where he was arrested.
I was surprised earlier you said they put him in like a home or someplace.
Like a halfway house.
A halfway house in New Jersey. And I'm thinking he didn't need to leave the state because Atlantic City is in New Jersey.
Exactly. So they found him there again. He was arrested again. And in July 2022, Giblin pled guilty to wire fraud and escaping from federal custody. In December 2022, Giblin was sentenced to 66 months in prison, as well as 3 years of supervised release and $23,428 in restitution.
Oh, good.
I truthfully would not be surprised if this is not the last time that we hear about him.
Oh, I would. No, it seems to be a habit.
Because 66 months would be
5.5 years.
Which is not, and he's not that old, to be honest with you. I mean, he's getting up there, but like, I feel like if he can survive that prison sentence, like he's got a few years on him. And I have a feeling when he gets out of prison, he's just going to do the same thing. Giblin has maintained that he himself is a victim of his gambling addiction. In an interview with the Daily Beast, Giblin said, quote, "Unfortunately, I have scammed and conned for many years. I am not happy about what I have done." He said, "Yes, it has been thrilling, exciting, and has also come with failures along the way." Asked about his victims, he said, "Nobody put a gun to these women's heads. They went to Western Union with their own free will and sent me money. My lawyer said some of these women were a little bit naive and gullible, and they wound up sending me money. All the money that I took, it just happened." End quote.
I call BS.
Right?
Big BS. It's not the victim's fault.
Yeah.
Yes.
That I know. I wanted to include that at the end because he's like, yeah, like I know I've done some bad things and I'm like not super happy, but it's not my fault that they just send me all of this money. Like, delusional to the max.
Yes.
I would say.
Oh. Really sad.
Yeah.
I feel for these people.
Yeah, because he at this point had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from
I
various
was glad
people.
at least at some point, okay, there was restitution, but he probably has spent this money. I can't imagine he owns a house and is driving a car or a car worth anything.
No, he's gambling it all in Atlantic City.
Right.
Yeah.
So nothing to give back.
Yeah. So that's the story of Patrick Giblin.
Okay. I think there's a lesson here about romance scams.
Yes.
Don't give them money.
Don't give anybody.
If somebody's going to threaten to kill somebody in my family, I'm going to the police. I don't care if the person is
I
dead.
appreciate that.
Don't go to the police.
As a member of your family, I appreciate that.
Yes. I hope you would do the same for me.
Yeah. And before you decide to give a scammer some of your money, why don't you check out this podcast?
Hello, this is Margot P.
And this is Margot D. And we are the Margos.
We are the Margos, co-hosts of the Book versus Movie podcast. We are the podcast that talks about films that are adapted from books. We read the book, we watch the movie, and then we decide which we like better, the book or the movie.
Now, I know what you guys are going to say. Duh, the book is always better than the movie. To which we always reply, have you ever read Jaws?
We are not film experts or literary geniuses.
Nope, we're just two friends who like to chat about books and movies.
We really like to go for a deep dive into the history of the book and the background of the author and the trivia from the movie set.
And most of all, we just like to have fun, so we never take ourselves or the books or movies too seriously.
You can find us wherever you sign up for your podcast under the name Book versus Movie.
And on social media, you can find us at Book versus and Movies. You just spell it all out.
Hope you check us out soon.
Well, that has been our show. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode, Mom.
This is fun. As I said, I'm a professional talker, so I appreciate you putting up with me. It was just a crazy story, and I loved yours too.
Thanks. We do not have anything coming up yet this year. Keep an eye on our social media. If we have anything coming up, that's going to be where it's at. But I think that's it. Do you have anything to end the show on? Anything you want to say for this episode?
Janelle, you need to come back.
And with that, our sound and editing is by Tiff Fullman. Our music is by Jason Zakshevsky, the Enigma.
Ooh, I get to hear that in person.
This has been the Bad Taste Crime Podcast. We will see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Left their bodies on the hillsides along the highway.
It was as if a wave of evil washed over this town.
We are all people in some form or another.
So, Tiff, if you could do that, we would love you forever.
We will.
Thanks,
we love
girl.
you already, though. Just saying.
Okay, now I'm going to go yell at you in real life.
Yahoo! So I take it it's cigarette break time?